Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the DFO Fantasy Show. I'm your host, managing fantasy editor of Daily Faceoff.com, Brock Seguin. And with me, as always, two of our DFO fantasy analysts. We got Dylan D. Berthiaume and Michael Beebs Bondy. D, how's it going, bud?
Doing good. Happy to be here. Big Jays win, finally sealing that playoff spot. Hopefully we got a division to celebrate within the next week or so. And nice distraction from the Packers loss on Sunday. So
yeah, we don't really talk about baseball around these parts because we are witnessing one of the biggest downfalls in maybe sports history right now with Detroit. Baseball does not exist, but football sure does. Me and Brock got to enjoy a nice win this week. So we're kind of on the opposite ends of the spectrum here, D. But you getting playoff baseball is a little bit nicer than just a regular season loss for your favorite team. So I'm a little jealous there, but we are doing good. I am loving the line tweets we're getting right now out of camps, seeing power plays. All of this stuff excites me way too much, but it's nice to kind of start to get a little bit of pictures of what's going to happen with teams. And you know how much we are nerds for that type of stuff. So that's awesome to see at a training camp this week. So with all that, shall we compare some players, fellas?
Yeah, so you can always tell that the NHL season is getting close when the page views start to ramp up on dailyfaceoff.com. The line page is obviously firing off right now. But another thing that's firing off is our 100% free Daily Faceoff draft kit. Just want to pump that before we get going. Inside the 100% free draft kit, you'll get advice from our 5 fantasy analysts, a consensus top 300 ranking list from all of us, exclusive must-draft players, value picks, ADPs to avoid. We've also got projections for over 600 skaters and goalies and a fully customizable rankings tool, so you can tailor everything in your league scoring and get customized rankings for that, plus a fantasy hockey strength of schedule breakdown and so much more. Do not go into your draft day unprepared. Grab the Daily Faceoff draft kit today. One other quick promo before we get in. We've also announced today the Daily Faceoff, first time ever. The Survivor Pool is here. We launched it today, so sign up for free there. The best part is it's 100% free, just like everything at dailyfaceoff.com. And just a quick breakdown of how it works. You start with 2 lives, and every Saturday of the NHL season, you got to just pick one team to win, but you can only pick one team or each team twice all season long. So you can't just click on the Colorado Avalanche or Toronto Maple Leafs every single week. So you get 2 lives. Each wrong pick costs you a life, and once you're out of lives, you are out of the pool. If you survive the longest, you'll be taking home $2,500, and it is 100% free to join. So sign up at dailyfaceoff.com for our Survivor Pool now. Check out the draft kit. Let's get into it today, boys. Today's show, we're going to talk about our fantasy bold predictions for the 2025-26 NHL season or fantasy hockey season. And in the second half of the show, we're going to just do what we're going to call the ADP Faceoff. So 2 players that are, nearly identical draft costs, but we can only choose one of them. And most of them are players that we didn't get a chance to break down or talk about much during our positional previews. If you didn't catch our positional preview episodes, be sure to go back and check those out wherever you get your podcasts. They're also available on the DFO Fantasy and Betting YouTube channel. We got the videos all broken down there. So when we get to the second half of the show, we've got 10 player comparisons to go over. But let's start with our big time fantasy bold predictions. We've got 3 each. D, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, we'll go with, I guess we'll do this one to start. We'll go with old friend of the show, Matias Maccelli, now on your Toronto Maple Leafs, starting the camp on the top line. So we're going to be bold and say he sticks there all season long, and he topped 60 points for the first time in his career. Almost did it a couple seasons ago, playing 16 minutes a night for the Coyotes. Not expecting PP one time, but could be one of the first to move up if the Leafs run into injury troubles, and he's always been very productive at 5v5. A stat from Jonas Siegel's article in The Athletic last week about Maccelli, obviously coming off the down year last season, but in the 2 seasons before that, Maccelli was tied for 17th in the NHL in assists per 60 at 5-on-5. Looks to be getting the first audition in Marner's old spot alongside Matthews and Nyes on the first line. If he can ease those concerns about his size and his defensive play and establish himself as Toronto's first line right winger, I think his really strong playmaking ability being used to set up Matthews and Nyes will easily allow him to rack up enough assists to surpass 60 points. So put that one on the board.
Yeah, Maccelli's obviously a guy that's probably not going to be drafted a lot, but somebody worth keeping an eye on or maybe throwing a flyer at, at the end of the draft, because anybody that plays with Austin Matthews could be in for a big season. We've seen him put up big numbers in years previous. Beebs, what about your first fantasy bold prediction for 25-26?
Yeah, before I drop that, I think it's a great time to mention me and Brock are going to be coming to you guys later this week with an episode that does kind of focus on players like Maccelli. guys that you might want to focus on later in your draft, or guys that might not even be getting drafted. So that's a great start right there. And I'm going to drop another one. It is Maxime Shabanov out in Long Island. And my thing is, I think he is going to win Rookie of the Year. He is a 24-year-old rookie, came over from the KHL last season, and this isn't that bold because this is basically our Temi Panarin 2.0. When Panarin won the Rookie of the Year many years back, he was 24 years old as well. I just came out of the KHL at a near point per game average, and that's kind of what Shabanov's doing. In 65 games last year, Shabanov had 67 points, so he's over a point per game in the KHL, and he had 187 shots on goal. So if you put that across 82 games, he is an over 200 shot on goal player while going over a point per game in the KHL. Shabanov is in kind of a nice spot because the Islanders absolutely suck, which is fantastic for fantasy purposes. And we've seen it before with people wanting to stay away from these bad rosters, and I don't mind going after players with high upside who can definitely eat up a lot of ice time in New York. He might not start out on power play 1, but if things don't go well, or if he does start out on power play 1, this guy could be an absolute steal at the bottom of your drafts, as well as what I think could be Rookie of the Year this season, since I think it's kind of a toss-up where everyone thinks Ivan Demidov's the rookie. This could be, is the Russian rookie to look at. This could be the actual one here. I love what this guy, kind of his tape we've seen out of the KHL. So it's going to be cool to see what he could do in the NHL. So that is my bold prediction. Maxime Shabanov, Rookie of the Year. Brock, what do you got as your first bold prediction off the board?
If you're into betting, Shabanov is currently plus 2,800 to win Rookie of the Year, the 11th highest odds on the board. My first fantasy bold prediction is Thomas Harley finishes a top 5 fantasy defenseman. Star's new head coach, Glenn Gulutzan, has already hinted that he likes to mix things up on the power play. And while he expects to use both Harley and Heiskanen on that top unit this year, it is Harley who's cracked the top power play unit to open camp, just like I had mentioned, is likely to happen during the defenseman preview episode. Now, Harley only has 2 power play goals over the last 2 seasons, but his even strength numbers during that time are super impressive. He's second among all defensemen in even strength goals, just 1 behind Cale Makar, and he's 11th in even strength points with 72. What's interesting, though, is his IPP, his individual points percentage, the amount of points that he gets while goals are scored while he's on the ice, is at 40.5% during that span, and it is the lowest of any one of the top 14 among even strength point defensemen during that time. That group averages closer to 48%, so his involvement should tick up a little bit. He's probably somebody that's due for some regression in that regard. If it ticks up to like 45%, which is a pretty stable mark for any solid puck moving defenseman like we know Harley is, given his talents and his ability to put up points at even strength. So I just think that this is a guy that, if he sees a slight uptick in that 55 IPP and layer on that chance of him becoming the primary quarterback on that power play, which has got just loads and loads of talent, I think you're looking at a massive breakout candidate from Thomas Harley this year, and a guy that I think finishes as a top 5 fantasy defenseman. D, what is your second bold prediction?
Yeah, we'll stick with the same theme here. I'll say Stuart Skinner will be a top 5 fantasy netminder. I think obviously what makes this prediction bold is Skinner's own inconsistent play over the last couple of seasons. But as I highlighted in our goalie preview episode, I think he has every opportunity to make this happen. He's going to be given the chance to once again get the lion's share of the work in goal for the Oilers, continue to get tremendous goal support, enough that he really just needs to provide us with good, not even great splits to make this prediction come true. I think if he can replicate the .913 save percentage he put up in 2023, I think he gets enough starts to push for 40 wins and be one of the most valuable goaltenders in fantasy hockey.
Yeah, absolutely love Stuart Skinner. I'm doing the perfect draft series on dailyfaceoff.com right now. So running through just kind of the ideal draft, or laying out just different scenarios in which your draft could go from picks 1 through 12. And I've written pick 1 and pick 2 so far, and Stuart Skinner's been on both those teams, just where he's getting drafted right now, like as a number 2 goalie. Just so much value, so much upside. Love the pick. Beebs, what is your second bold prediction?
Yeah, a little more bold, but I'm also going back to some more young talent. And my guess is that my bold prediction is that San Jose will produce 2 over a point per game players this season. Of course, we got Macklin Celebrini, who I think will be one of those. He had 63 points in 70 games last year as a rookie, so completely in the picture. But some other names that we have that might be hanging alongside Macklin that could do this are William Eklund, as we mentioned last episode, 58 points in 77 games played. He would, have to take it quite a bit step further, but if he does, I could see him flirting with over a point per game, as well as Will Smith this year. 45 points in 74 games played last year. A lot of those points came in the second half of the year, and we saw him be a near point per game player when he was really handed the reins in that second half. So it'd be awesome to see out there. And then actually Tyler Toffoli, not that I think he will go over a point per game, but he still had 54 points in 78 games last year. He will be likely in that top 6. He's never been an over point per game player, but someone, who I think could help my bold prediction happen if the craziest of crazy things happen out in San Jose. I would love to see one player go over a point per game there, but I'm expecting all players to take a step forward this year. And if that does happen, likely they will do it together. And it'd be pretty cool to see some offense more offense out of these young stars that I think we can all agree are just super fun to watch.
Yeah, lots of young talent in San Jose, but hopefully, I feel like only one of our second bold predictions can come true, because if your bold prediction comes true, then mine probably doesn't, because I'm saying that Adam Fantilli has a better fantasy season than both Macklin Celebrini and Connor Bedard. All the attention right now is on the first round picks from 2023, or first overall picks, from 2023 and 2024. But the number 2023, or the number 3 pick in 2023 is flying under the radar right now. A lot of numbers there. Macklin Celebrini is coming off the board at pick 44 right now. That's the 4th round, while Connor Bedard is coming off about a round later in the middle of the 5th round. Meanwhile, Adam Fantilli is only being drafted in about 70% of leagues with an ADP near 171. That is the 15th round. Just absolutely enormous value. I've mentioned it on the show before. I've mentioned it all throughout the Daily Faceoff draft kit. But from January 1st through the end of last season, Fantilli quietly put up 39 points in 44 games, and an incredible 92% of that production came at even strength. In that span, he ranked 2nd in the NHL in even strength goals with 22, tied for 18th in even strength points with 36, and 26th in shots on goal at even strength with 101. On an 82-game pace, that point average would reach 67 even strength points, which was the exact same number as Kyle Connor and Mitch Marner, and behind only Pastrnak, McKinnon, Kucherov, Draisaitl, Hagel, and McDavid. Ever heard of them? Fantilli has just 7 power play points. 7 power play points through 131 career games. So even a modest bump in power play usage and production, I think we could be talking about an absolutely ginormous breakout year here from Fantilli, and it just costs you absolutely nothing in comparison to guys like Celebrini and Bedard. I think we can all agree that their floor might be a little bit safer, but man, this even strength and 5-5 production from Fantilli has been nothing short of spectacular, and a guy that I really think can take a huge leap this year. D, close out with your final bold prediction.
All right, going to go with another one of my faves here. We'll say Tage Thompson will score 50 goals this season, despite more roster turnover in the offseason in Buffalo. And, it's left him with a pretty awful surrounding cast. I still think this is the year that Tage finally gets over that 50-goal hump. I think he's motivated to get off to a strong start, cement his spot on the U.S. Olympic team. I think Yuri Kulik takes a step forward this year. I think Alex Tuck still makes for a really strong wingman for Thompson at 5v5. And I think Rasmus Dahlin continues to dominate play and provide Tage with all the scoring opportunities he can handle. So I say Tage stays healthy, fires around 300 shots on goal, pots 50 of them, and is in contention for his first Rocket Richard trophy.
Beebs, how about you?
Tage almost feels like a sleeper this season, and I love that one. And mine here kind of goes against Brock's bust from a few episodes ago, but I had to look out for my boy. Valeri Nichushkin will play in more than, get this, 62 games this year. That's probably the boldest part of the prediction.
Bold.
And he will finish top 20 in the NHL in goals. They kind of have to go hand in hand to happen. And as we've seen in the last 3 years, it's really hard to do out in Colorado for Valeri Nichushkin. He's missed 39% of regular season hockey across the last 3 seasons. But despite that, he's still despite only averaging 50 games a season, he still averages 22 goals during that time per season and 144 shots on net, alongside 0.89 points per game. So he's still putting up the production. Last season, we saw him put up 34 points in 43 games, 21 goals were there. So we have seen the production before. Again, he just has to stay healthy, or dare I say it, just stay on the ice. Let's say that. Extrapolated across a full 82-game season, his season last year would have given him 40 goals and 65 points. That would have cleanly placed him in the top 20 in goal scoring. So that's kind of a tap in there. But actually, across the last 3 seasons with the numbers that I presented earlier, it would be a 36 goal season and 73 points. Now, last year, to crack the top 20 in scoring, you needed 35 goals. So he would be hovering right around that pace over his last 3 years average. So for Nichushkin to do this, like I mentioned, it's all about staying healthy. We saw Colorado come out in training camp. They said Nichushkin's going to start at least in training camp on a top line with Necas and McKinnon. That's a pretty solid line. Even if he's not getting power play time right off the bat, you can still justify a draft position at that spot, knowing that he has the ability to go up. But Colorado is known to move their lineup around. So for him to complete this more than 62 games and top 20 in goals, I'm going to need him to stay on that awesome line and to get some power play time. And I would love to see Nichushkin just put it together for one season so that we can stop asking what if, because I ask that every year. This guy's a stud. Just stay healthy.
Yeah, I have him projected for 65 games this year, so over 62 is pretty bold view.
Big year.
Yeah, I obviously still like Nichushkin. Just the draft cost, it has come down a little bit. He's at 101.2 now, but still going to get ahead of guys like Svechnikov, Dylan Guenther, guys that I really like. So I think just it's still a little risky. I stand by that ADP to avoid, but it has come down a little bit. It feels a little bit easier at this point. My final bold prediction for this year is that Logan Cooley, Dylan Guenther, and JJ Peterka will all be point per game players. You probably saw this one coming in our center, left wing, and right wing preview episodes. I listed Cooley, Peterka, and Guenther all as my breakout picks. Early in the preseason, they're already skating together on the Mammoth's top line. People came out and said, whoa, Keller's the top line. Logan Cooley straight up came out and said, we're the top line. So Guenther is currently on the top power play unit. Cooley and Peterka are working together on the second unit. To close out last season, both Cooley and Guenther were averaging over 18.5 minutes per night in March and April, a strong sign of their usage that we can expect this year. It honestly could end up being the floor of their usage this year because they were up over 20 minutes a lot in that time. And then Peterka was close to 20 minutes per night in the final couple months of the season in Buffalo as well. So when you put it all together, this line has the potential to be one of the most exciting offensive units in the league this year, with all three players primed to break out at the same time. So they're going to all fuel each other's breakout, and hopefully all three come true for the positional preview episodes. But it's funny because I literally like all three of them individually, and I didn't really realize that I picked all three of them to be breakouts, and then they all ended up on a line together. I'm like, this is the greatest thing of all time. It's just all going to go hand in hand. So with that, those are our 9 fantasy bold predictions. Be sure, if you're watching on YouTube, to drop some of your bold predictions in the comment section. But now let's move on to our ADP Faceoff, where we will talk about some players that are going close to each other in ADP, and I'll let the boys duke it out to see who they would rather have. Maybe they agree on the same player. But let's start. We've got 6 forwards, and we'll start with Macklin Celebrini, whose current ADP is 44, or Connor Bedard, whose current ADP is 53.5. Now, boys, obviously this is a would you rather. Which one would you rather have? But let's factor in ADP, because they're not always right next to each other. But which ADPs do you like more? Which players do you like more? D, we'll start with you, because I already know that Beebs is very high on Macklin Celebrini given his bold prediction for the season. So I want to know, who do you rather have, because you are a big Connor Bedard truther.
Yeah, I obviously still believe in the talent and the upside, but Celebrini's a dog in his own right, obviously, and I just feel a little bit better about that surrounding cast, as Beebs kind of already highlighted in his bold prediction. So I will still go with Celebrini. Already outproduced Bedard last season when you consider the games he missed. Terrific shot volume for an 18-year-old rookie. Really bodes well for his production moving forward. Not in love with either ADP, to be honest with you. I've got them both ranked about half a round later than where they're going, but I still prefer Celebrini's draft cost to Bedard.
Yeah, we're kind of on the same page on that one. I just think, we're choosing superstars here. If you get either, they're both in line for a breakout, but not a breakout, a step forward. But yeah, Celebrini, the surrounding cast, the ability to get a few more shots on net, it's going a little bit further for me here. I'm really excited about Macklin this year. I do agree with you, though. I think 44 is quite sweet. You're kind of drafting him for what we think he might be at best. And if anything kind of goes wrong there, you could be in for basically the value you got out of Bedard last year, which was not very pretty. So I definitely like Celebrini more here, but I've heard a lot of people where Celebrini goes off the board and they get stuck with Bedard. I think that's quite all right too.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely love Celebrini's upside, but just to put a kind of feather in Bedard's cap here, at 5v5 last year, he had 24 assists. 21 of them were primary assists, just 3 secondary assists. So hopefully a couple bounces go his way this year. But yeah, I'm not in love with either draft cost. I think if I had to pick, I would go Celebrini's draft cost looks a little bit better. Let's move on to the second one. We've got Seth Jarvis of the Carolina Hurricanes, his current ADP 65.5, and Wyatt Johnson at 64.9. Now, Beebs, we'll start with you here. We saw Wyatt Johnson on that top line center role with Mikko Rantanen, kind of like the first day of training camps. The Stars have really been shuffling their lines here throughout training camp, and I think it's hard to get an exact indication of what the lines are going to look like to begin the season. But I think we can probably safely say that Johnson is going to be playing more like top 6 role this year than he is going to be playing that like third line role with Jamie Benn based on the early line. So with that said, we also said, there's going to be somebody that's going to shift to the middle for Carolina, Jarvis or Logan Stankoven, and it looks like Stankoven is going to be the guy, with Seth Jarvis being on the top line with Sebastian Aho and Nikolai Ehlers' new look line there for the Hurricanes. So with all of that unpacked, Beebs, who would you rather have at ADP, Wyatt Johnson or Seth Jarvis?
I'm going to close my eyes and I'm just going to choose one of the two, because you couldn't have chosen 2 closer players to compare realistically. I personally would go Wyatt Johnston. I just think that there's a little bit more upside there. But with that said, you could go the exact same way with Seth Jarvis. We're looking at 2 extremely talented young talents who cover multiple positions. Jarvis has center, left wing, and right wing, which is pretty nice. Wyatt has center and right wing, so they both are good in that sense. If you are in a banger league, I will say Seth Jarvis hits about double the amount as Wyatt Johnston. He had 95 hits last year. Wyatt had 45, so that would be one thing that would push Seth ahead of him, depending on your league, the way it's laid out. But as far as most leagues, I'd probably go Wyatt. Just the overall, like I said, kind of upside here. Last year he had 1856 on ice. That's 30 seconds less than Jarvis had. And I think if he were to push himself up at 30 seconds more, he could have a bit more production. And last year they kind of ended up in the same area. Johnson had 71 points with 33 goals. Seth Jarvis had 67 with 32 goals. So as I mentioned, you could go either way here, and I think you're going to be it's kind of a cop-out. I feel bad, but this is definitely the hardest one I found to choose out of the two. But I'm going to go Johnston here. I just like what's going on in Dallas a tiny bit more than Carolina, and we've seen Carolina kind of bury guys in their lineup a little. We've seen Dallas do it too, but Carolina do it a bit heavier sometimes. So
that was a long-winded way of telling us you have no idea which one you'd rather.
I have absolutely zero clue. Yeah, they both. I want them both realistically, but yeah,
fair enough.
You got anything better that's just way more straightforward than what the jargon I just laid out there?
I will definitively say Wyatt Johnson for me. I do think you're right. Like, there's more of a case for Jarvis in banger leagues, to be sure, but I still got Johnson ranked about 20 spots higher than Jarvis. I just like his upside that much more. And I do like the surrounding cast a lot more, just the makeup of the team, right? Like we talked about multiple times over the last few seasons, how it's hard for guys to maintain elite production in Carolina if they're not playing on that top line with Aho. And I kind of like you highlighted, Brock, there's just so many other options for Johnston to end up with and be in a really good spot to put up elite numbers. I think, it's only going to be so long before we're talking about him as a 90-point player and a late first, early second round pick. If it's not next season, it's almost certainly going to be the year after that. And I think he gets consistent exposure to one of Robertson or Rantanen at 5v5 and locks down a spot on that top power play unit. So Wyatt for me.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Wyatt as well. Last year, we saw that increase in usage that we wanted to see. It just kind of came with players that maybe weren't the exact players we'd like them to be playing with. But I agree. Robertson or Rantanen, whichever one you're with, you're probably in good hands. His IPP dropped to 69.6 last year at 5v5, which is decent still. But he was at 86.5, which there's some regression there. Obviously, he can't maintain that. But if he can get back up around 75% IPP this year, I think that'll go a long way when you're playing 19 minutes a night in a lineup as loaded as Dallas's is, especially if he's with Mikko Rantanen. Definitely big fan there. Okay, the next one is interesting because we've got Elias Pettersson, who nobody really seems to know what to do with this year. Obviously, was an amazing player for an extended period of time, and then last year it was just an absolute disaster, and people we're just stuck with him essentially. So I'm just pull up our rankings from last year. I had him as the number 8 center overall. His ADP last year was 20.4. This year it's down to 62. Robert Thomas was my ADP to avoid in the centers episode at the start of the year. Either everyone's listening to me or everybody saw through the ADP because it was 40 at the time. It's dropped down to 68.8. So D, who would you rather have here? Elias Pettersson bounce back season or Robert Thomas to kind of continue his point per game prowess?
Yeah, it's tough because you do just kind of have to throw out most of last season for Pettersson to justify this draft price. I'm willing to do that. He was just so productive for so long before last year, and they just seem to be a hot mess on all fronts. And I think the whole JT Miller situation can't be overlooked here either. So I'm willing to give him a pass, especially at this draft price. He talked about how much he's fallen already, Brock, compared to last year. I'm ready to buy into the hot stretch he had to finish the year. I just want more goal scoring upside this early in the draft. Needs to restore that shot volume, but I think he obviously just offers way more goal scoring potential than the Matchbox 20 man. So I will buy the dip on PD.
Great Matchbox 20 reference. Love you got that in. I'm also on the EP40 train here. Realistically, I had him as a sleeper in my articles, so I'd be going against everything if I didn't continue to support the boy as he has another resurgence. It's just all about the ceiling for me, which is kind of what Dee was saying. But across those 2 years before last year, he was averaging 36.5 goals and 95.5 points, where I don't even think Robert Thomas has that ability to really hit above 30 goals or above 90 points. He hasn't really shown it. With that said, he has one of the most comfortable floors you can have, and we know what we're going to get. It's just if you want a little more goals, you want a little more shots, I'm going to go the direction of Elias Pettersson. We can't forget that 102-point season from just 3 years ago where he had 257 shots. Just shows really what he's capable of. I think we're in for a big bounce back year, one that I'm willing to take at this draft spot, especially just knowing kind of the ceiling. And hilariously enough, Pettersson actually, before last year's horrible year, the lowest amount of goals he's ever scored in a full season was 28, where Robert Thomas hasn't even surpassed that as a career high yet. So just to go to show how much more scoring potential Elias Pettersson has than Robert Thomas. So yeah, I think it's an easy choice here for me.
Yeah, it's so weird to look at Elias Pettersson's numbers last year. Like 257 shots in 2023, 109 shots last year. Even after the Miller trade, he was on pace for 89 shots over 82 games. Like last year just made no sense. Quinn Hughes did come out this year, or not this week, but last week. I'm not going to lie to you. All that nonsense last year weighed on him heavily from a personal standpoint and professional standpoint. No one wants to deal with that. Given that, you have to find a way to perform, though, as well. He's a really competitive person. I expect him to have a great year. So if Quinn Hughes is buying in, I'll buy in. Yeah, I just don't like the kind of one-dimensional aspect of Robert Thomas. I think basically at Pettersson, even if he doesn't shoot at his floor, he can match the goal total of Robert Thomas. And yeah, maybe the assist won't be there, but I'm buying the upside here. I've got them separated by one spot in my rankings. So bit of a toss up here, but I don't think I'll draft either one of these players. I'm well below. And as you can see on the screen here, ADP is 62 and 68. The DFO rankings, our consensus DFO top 300, have both players below ADP at the moment as well. So probably not a lot of us having these guys on our teams this year. Let's move on to a couple more centers. We got Dylan Larkin, whose current ADP is 90.8. And Nico Hischier, whose ADP is 94.7. Project very similarly. Beebs, who would you rather have?
Yeah, you're throwing me the tough ones here, and that's A-okay. I would rather have your boy Dylan Larkin, Brock. And as you mentioned, they basically project out the same. They ended last year very close to the same in every category, down to banger leagues. But for me, Dylan Larkin averages just a few more shots a game, which is higher potential for fantasy success. I think they both kind of have a relatively same general floor. We're expecting, 30-ish or so goals, 70 plus points, but the ceiling is kind of the same spot too. It seems neither really has that 90 plus point potential. And both of them kind of maxed out their time on ice as a forward last year. We saw them both play over 20 minutes per ice. So they both kind of, I think we've seen likely our best days. Larkin wins it for me just with that 69-point season in 68 games back in 2023-24. That's where it excites me that maybe there's just a little bit more in the ceiling tank for Larkin. So I'd be choosing him if I was in this spot. Both strict center eligibility. And pretty much you're probably going to realistically have to make this choice when it comes down to it. Also, I think that couple of the pieces around in Detroit, I expect to take steps forward. I think in New Jersey, obviously we expect Hughes to take another step forward. But I don't know. I like what's going on in Detroit offensively this year. I like them both. But yeah, give me Larkin. D, please go Heischer for me. We just need some a little bit of
I can't do it. I got to stay
Nice.
true to myself for the people. Can't just disagree for the sake of content. But hopefully it, becomes a little bit more reassuring if we're agreeing on a lot of these guys. But I do love the value on both of them. So, I wouldn't be surprised if there's builds where I wait on center and kind of scoop both of these guys up in kind of those late mid rounds. I got them ranked both almost 3 rounds ahead, just in line with the consensus ranking there. But if I had to pick, I would go with Larkin. Just that significantly better shot volume makes his goal production that much more reliable. Doesn't have a Jack Hughes to compete with for 5v5 time alongside his team's best wingers. And like you, Brock, I really like Lucas Raymond to break out this season, which could help push Larkin over the point per game plateau for the first time. So, yeah, give me Larkin.
Yeah, my bold prediction, my third bold prediction was almost that Lucas Raymond becomes a 100-point player this year. So if that ends up coming true, if I can sneak in a fourth bold prediction, then I think that it'll go a long way in helping Larkin. And I just think his goal scoring is a little bit more stable than what we got out of Nico. Obviously, 35 goals from Nico last year, but had to shoot 18.7%, the highest of his career. Also saw more ice time, obviously, with Jack Hughes missing a lot of time, where I think, the over 20 minutes a game is probably a little bit more reliable from Larkin as well. Let's move on. Beebs, you're going to be excited about this one. Travis Konechny, ADP 96.8, or Valerie Nichushkin, ADP 97.7. So, Beebs, we've already heard your thoughts on Valerie Nichushkin. D, we already know my thoughts on Valerie Nichushkin. Good player, but don't like the draft cost. So, do you prefer or much prefer the draft cost of Travis Konechny?
I do. It's Konechny for me. It's a good comparison because I think he does have a really similar production profile to Nichushkin, but just carries none of that injury risk. He's great for extended leagues as well. Averaged 216 shots and 92 hits over the last 2 seasons while operating at a 75-point pace. So really nice category coverage to go along with this high production floors. Really, really like the value he offers at his ADP.
Yeah, this might actually surprise you, but I think it's completely dependent on your first 6 draft picks here. If you have a team you feel comfortable with them and you don't have anyone that you don't have the Bedard, you don't have the Celebrini on your roster that you need to just overperform, I think you could take a chance on Nichushkin if you and in that case I probably would, just because I think his upside is a little bit more than Konechny if they both play the same amount of games. But as we alluded to earlier, Nichushkin could miss time. And if you have a couple guys that you've already taken chances on in your draft, you need to go with the safe pick here, and you cannot risk it. So Konechny is the safe play. Nichushkin's the chance play. So it's really down to how big your onions are. I believe that's what they said on Monday Night Football last night was the term. So it depends on the build of your team. It's a bit of a cop-out, but that is kind of what you got to deal with when you're looking at someone as injury-prone as Valerie Nichushkin.
Yeah, I think that's actually a good point. Especially even if you have some other guys that are maybe a little bit more injury prone at the top of your draft, then you might want to go with a bit of a safety blanket in Konechny, where I do agree. I think Nichushkin's got some goal scoring upside that Konechny just doesn't really seem to quite have that same ceiling, but there's just a tremendous amount of risk associated with Valerie Nichushkin as well. I'll go Konechny slightly, but I still like Nichushkin. It's so hard to trust him. Let's move on to our final forward comparison. We've got Zach Hyman, ADP 103.4, and Andrei Svechnikov, ADP 104.4. Shockingly, the DFO rank average is the exact same as Zach Hyman's ADP. So we like where he's going. Now, a bit of a caveat here. Zach Hyman's going to miss some time, probably not going to be back until like November. Could be longer. It's a bit of a murky situation, but they are kind of expecting him back early November. We'll see how that plays out. But Svechnikov, obviously a guy who we talk about a lot on this podcast, has never really truly reached his ceiling. One of these guys plays with Connor McDavid when healthy. The other one is likely going to play with Logan Stankoven, who hasn't played the center ice position very often in the NHL. So it's going to be interesting, but I do think that Stankoven offers a little bit more that Jesperi Kotkaniemi did not, and it could elevate Andrei Svechnikov's game. So that'll be interesting to see what happens there with Stankoven and Svechnikov on that second line. But Beebs, let's start with you here. Obviously, Hyman missing some time, but do you want to just kind of wait on that first month and reap the benefits of him playing with McDavid, or going with the safer pick in Yeah,
there certainly is a case for Hyman. I am going Svech just off the completely dumb idea that I think that there's still more in the tank for fantasy wise, but we've been saying that for 8 years now. Hyman, I will say there's totally a case if you have a couple IR spots to just stash him, go see who the hot player is at that time and wait until, they're saying about November 1st. As you mentioned, it's kind of murky, so it could be whatever. One thing in Hyman's favor is Trent Frederick's expected to take his spot on the top line. And when you kind of compare out their careers, Trent Frederick wishes he was Zach Hyman on his best days. So when Hyman does return, it's very likely, as you mentioned, he just moves right back in there with Connor. But just strictly due to not knowing what could happen with that injury, we saw what happened with Hyman last year when he kind of had a down year. He was on the borderline of rosterable. Svechnikov was also the same, and he was probably one of the biggest letdowns of any player. But I think if Svechnikov can just take a little bit of a step forward, I'm willing to take this risk at 104. I just don't love drafting a player who's hurt to start the year, especially when it's something like this. He's coming off a big surgery. We don't really know. It could take him a bit to get going. And if that's the case, you might even be able to just find Hyman on the waiver wire if he doesn't get it going after 10 games in Edmonton. So I think for the chance on Svechnikov, you go that direction. And if he starts out his usual bad self again, then you can kind of make some other choices down the line. But even if he does play bad, I think you could even make a case to trade whoever had Simon after the draft for Svechnikov. He definitely holds more name value.
Trent Frederick was 6'3", 221. I'm not throwing any shade at him. What are your thoughts here, D? Are you going with Svech or Hyman?
Yeah, I think Beebs raises a good point in that, guys are going to get hurt, right? Like there's going to be multiple guys in your team that miss time over the course of the season. So it's not ideal saddling yourself to one off the bat like that. Even with that, like Hyman, if he misses the first month of the season, I still think he offers really good value at this ADP, but that timeline is enough to push Svechnikov ahead for me. I wrote about Svechnikov in our sleeper article in the draft kit, so check that out if you want to learn more. But the category coverage he provides, along with what I still believe is some untapped offensive potential like you guys, it's just really enticing at his ADP. So one of my favorite values across the board this season, simply because of that category coverage. It's going to make him a safe pick either way. And if he does take that step forward, he's going to be an absolute home run pick at this ADP.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Like Zach Hyman was like the hardest player to rank last year because of the massive breakout year he had the year previous. And then now this year with the injury, he's once again one of the hardest players to rank. And Svechnikov's the same thing. It's always just, you're either going to be left like really, really upset with the pick, or it's going to be a home run. And it's just a shot that you got to take every single year. And I think I'm really excited to see what he can do without Jesperi Kotkaniemi as his number one center. So I'm going to go Svechnikov as well, and hopefully the Logan Stankoven project works out for Svech. Let's move to the blue line now, where we've got Dougie Hamilton at ADP 73.9 or Mikhail Sergachev at ADP 79.8. Now, this is a really interesting one because right now Luke Hughes remains unsigned, and the most recent report from Pierre LeBrun is that both sides in the Luke Hughes negotiation spoke again Monday night in an effort to find some leeway in talks for the unsigned RFA. Both sides still need to find more common ground, still a ways apart. Both sides are focused on a long-term deal, but aren't there yet on the AAV. So I think that we all, and Jack Hughes himself came out and said that he wants his brother, Luke Hughes, to be the PP1 quarterback for the entirety of the season. Obviously, he's not the head coach of the New Jersey Devils, but to think that he doesn't have pull would be silly. So if that's the case, that obviously affects Dougie Hamilton's value. But now Dougie, he's still a guy that can get the job done at 5v5, and he could start the year on PP1. And if things are going well, Jack Hughes be damned, it might not matter all that much. So, D, we'll start with you. Big Dougie Hamilton guy in years previous. Mikhail Sergachev, though, seems like the guy that's got the kind of unquestioned lock on PP1 in Utah. So are you kind of just going with maybe the safer play or taking the risk on Dougie here?
I guess I'll take the risk. I'm just going to stick with our one true love on this podcast, shot volume, and say Dougie. I think they're both in pretty good spots with where they're going in drafts right now. I think some of those concerns about Dougie are pretty baked into this ADP because I think he easily outperforms it if he does hold on to that job. But Sergachev fired just 132 shots on goal last year, shot 11.4% from the back end. So he's due for some big regression there. And for me, the upside of Dougie's surrounding cast on that power play outweighs the risk around his injury history or Luke Hughes waiting in the wings to take over.
Yeah, I totally agree. We're a Dougie-friendly podcast over here, and we're going to keep that rolling. This kind of just feels, to me, like the Pettersson Robert Thomas comparison. Dougie's the Pettersson here, of course. We saw his 22 goal, 74-point potential back in 2022-23. And that's just the level that I don't know if Sergachev can get to. Just to kind of back up Dougie a bit more, in the last 5 NHL seasons, he's missed 101 games total. So that's over 20 games a year. And at the same time, he ranks 10th in the NHL in goals and 6th in shots among defensemen. So he gets it done. And it's someone that at this point, this is likely your second defenseman off the board, maybe your first. But if it is your second, I'm a lot more confident taking a shot on a guy like Dougie. And even if it is my first, we went across in the D episode. There's a couple other names you can go out a little later if you do need to really shore up your defensive unit. So yeah, I think the upside, the shot potential, all the things that D said. We're a Dougie heavy podcast, and we will remain that way.
Yeah, I find it difficult to pull the trigger on Dougie, where I find it a little bit less difficult to pull the trigger on Sergachev. I just feel like I've got a couple less question marks. He feels like the slightly safer pick at the moment. I don't know, like, if Bush comes to shove this year, I really don't know if I'm going to have any Dougie Hamilton on my team. I have him ranked ahead of Sergachev by 3 spots, but I just, for whatever reason, when push comes to shove, I just feel like Sergachev is the slightly safer pick. Played 25 minutes a night last year in his first season with Utah. I think maybe some of it has to do with the fact that I'm just so high on Utah and all these young pieces. And if he can take a step forward, if that team can take a step forward this year, I think that it could go a long way for Sergachev as well. And I think ultimately Luke Hughes probably gets signed sooner rather than later. And if he does bump Dougie, I don't know if the 5v5 production and power play 2 production is going to be enough to warrant that ADP. So I'm going to go Sergachev, although I think there is a world where Dougie ends up being a really nice draft day value as well. I don't think it's out of the question. I just don't think that I'm going to be clicking on Dougie all that often this preseason. Let's move on to a second defenseman comparison. And another friend of the show, we've got Jackson Lacombe, ADP 120.8, and Erik Karlsson, ADP 128.8. So it's kind of the new kid on the block versus the old veteran that just seems to always get it done. We talked about Lacombe a little bit in our D episode, but we have not spoken about Erik Karlsson at all. And even with what was a shitty year in Pittsburgh last year, guy still had 11 goals, 42 assists, 53 points, close to 200 shots on goal, still getting it done. His first 2 years in Pittsburgh, nearly identical results, 11 goals in both seasons, 45 and 42 assists during that stretch, averaging over 200 shots per season as well. The power play production remains pretty solid. So I'm curious to hear what you guys think, because I find myself, passing on the comb at that ADP a little bit and finding a little bit more comfort, about a round later here with Erik Karlsson. But Beebs, obviously we know you're very high on Jackson Lacombe. Are you clicking on Lacombe first here?
Yeah, I got so excited that I stuck my tongue out when you said his name there. That was insane. But I like both these names. I obviously think I would go Lacombe here, but in Karlsson's defense, I think his ADP is perfect here. He's just going against my darling this year. It's a ceiling versus floor kind of draft. And at this point in the draft, I kind of mentioned it with the previous 2 D-men, especially at this point, you know what you have in front of you with your defenseman. If your D is solidified, you've got your Sergachev, you've got your Vince Dunn, something like that. And maybe both those guys who are going to give you just your stats, take the chance on a Jackson Lacombe over Erik Karlsson. I think we can all agree that if Lacombe takes it to that next level, he will give us more production than we'd expect from 35-year-old Erik Karlsson. With that said, Karlsson's super safe. You mentioned it, 53 points last year, 191 shots on goal. That's very rare for a defenseman to get. And that's pretty solid. I fear for Karlsson. He used to have a known history of injuries in general. But since then, he's kind of put that whole thing away, as he's played every game in 3 of the last 4 seasons. With that said, as I mentioned, he's 35. I could easily see, it's going to be tough to put together another 82-game season, especially with what's happening out in Pittsburgh. There's also going to be a lot of trade rumors around Erik Karlsson this season. I just don't really want to touch it. So if I can, or touch it if I have the option at Lacombe, let's say. But as mentioned, I like both these guys. I would choose Lacombe because at this point, he's probably my 3rd defenseman, and I want a 3rd defenseman with a number 1 D-man ceiling right there. But, like you mentioned, it's there's a whole round difference here in picks, so not as tight.
I will give us our first solid disagreement here. I like Lacombe a lot, obviously. I just don't think with that surrounding cast of players around him that he does have that, elite upside this season. I think maybe Bert's a year or two down the road before we're talking about him as a top 15, top 12 fantasy blue liner. And again, I'm just going to trust the shot volume here and go with Karlsson. Even as Lacombe's ice time grew last season, the volume just never really took off. Again, I like what he offers. I think they're both good value picks at the position, but I think Karlsson just offers a much higher floor, as I think obviously you would agree as well, Beebs. And like super high for this late in the draft at the position. And I think if Lacombe takes a step forward, we're expecting him to, or at least I expect him to, then he probably finishes around 10 goals and 40 assists, which would be a great year for him. But as you kind of have already pointed out, it's exactly where Karlsson has operated at since becoming a Penguin. So with that surrounding cast, I just don't think Lacombe's upside is high enough to justify by passing Karlsson for him.
Yeah, I think the one question mark with Karlsson is just like if you're in a league that has plus minus, that's probably going to crater. He was a minus 24 last year, but I don't think that Lacombe is, that much safer of an option there playing in Anaheim, although he was even last year. So it is possible that he drastically outperforms them. But Anaheim's certainly not a quality defensive club either. But Lacombe did hold his own in that regard last year. So I'll give a slight nod to Karlsson, but I think the offensive upside is still great. And yeah, there's a lot of old pieces in Pittsburgh, but I still think there's a lot of potential goal scoring with guys like Crosby still on the roster. Let's get to a couple goalies now to close out the show. We will start with Logan Thompson versus Jacob Markstrom. ADPs are nearly identical. Logan Thompson at 71.5, Markstrom at 73.1. D, you were a Logan Thompson truther last year. You had him as a bust this year. Curious what you would do when staring at Logan Thompson and Jacob Markstrom head to head, though.
Yeah, this is an easy Markstrom for me. I think I even brought him up as an example of somewhere else I'd rather go in this spot at the position. I don't want to reiterate too much of what I said about my concerns about Thompson on that goalie preview episode, but a reduced projected point total for that team on top of him continuing to split starts with Charlie Lindgren makes this an easy call for me. I think, our projections have about a 4-star difference. I wouldn't be surprised if that's closer to 10-15 in reality.
I got to go. We got to have another off one here because I'm going Logan Thompson. I worry about Markstrom's health. I think realistically, when we look at the amount of starts, they both kind of flirted around the same point. And for the maybe 3 or 4 less starts you're going to get from Logan Thompson, I'm fine with the maybe 10 points of save percentage we've seen him put up in the last 3 seasons better than Markstrom. Markstrom really scares me. He's below a 900 save percentage his last 3 seasons. As I mentioned, gets hurt a lot. Jake Allen sitting there, not that he's looking to take any time, but we've seen him be a serviceable backup. And Washington's just a little bit of a better team on paper last season. They finished 2nd in goals for, 9th in goals against, where New Jersey finished 20th in goals for, 5th in goals against. So those things could both change. It's kind of, these are very close, but I would go Thompson. I do expect him to kind of squeeze in a few more starts this year. They've kind of tried to push him a little bit further each year. So if he can go over 50, which I don't think is really a possibility for Markstrom, then I'm going to go Thompson. So it's a tight one, but yeah, for me, it's the Washington tender.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. Like the sports books have these two looking nearly identical coming into the season. I do think that Thompson has the potential to see more starts, although the Capitals have quite clearly shown an unwillingness to do so. It would be nice if they would give him 55 starts. I think he would be an absolute steal. Markstrom, I don't feel great about Markstrom either, but the Devils were a little bit better defensively than the Capitals last year. So this one's really, really tight. I have Logan Thompson 3 spots ahead of Markstrom just on the hope of potential upside of the Capitals giving him a few more starts. But I see a world in which Markstrom does start 10 more games, as D said. I think it is entirely possible, but Markstrom feels relatively capped, where I think there is some potentially untapped potential here with Thompson, and he'll be at least a split stabilizer, if nothing less. But yeah, I do agree where there is a world where Markstrom sees 10 more starts and is the better pick without a doubt. But I guess I'm hopeful that the Capitals will lean on the better of the 2 goalies that they've got a little bit heavier this year. The final one, we've got 2 veterans. We've got Thatcher Demko and Jordan Binnington. Demko ADP 92.9, Binnington ADP 93.8. So Binnington going later, but according to the the DFO consensus rankings, we've got Binnington quite a bit ahead. Beebs, are you in the Binnington camp as well?
I sure am. This one feels a lot like a couple of the other, floor ceiling type debates that we had. We know that Demko can be just an elite goaltender, but do we know he can do it lately. Last year he had an 89 save percentage that was absolutely disgusting. You could barely roster him, and he's only averaging 35.3 games played across his last 3 seasons, where Jordan Binnington's kind of the exact opposite. He's averaging 58 games played across his last 3 seasons, 28 wins a season, but he's really only giving us a closer to 900 save percentage. I think the floor is just way more safer with Binnington than it is with Demko. Kevin Lankinen, we saw him kind of take a step forward last year, I guess we'll call it, and that could affect Demko's starts. I don't think Vancouver wants to run him, 50 starts this season and hurt him again. That'd be an absolute disaster. So I could see more of 50-50 split going on there, where Binnington I see closer to his usual upper 50s starts. So I think this one's definitely Binnington. And if you're in a league that does saves, then it's no question it is JB. But yeah, this was another one where it's very tight, and it's just, I guess it depends on the risk you're willing to take, but I would be taking it safe with Binnington here.
Yeah, I agree. I'll take Benner at similar projected point totals for these two teams, and you don't have the injury concerns that you do with Demko. I think Demko's workload will probably start out slow as they look to ease him back into playing full time, whereas I expect Binnington to be more of a workhorse all season long. So because of that, I think he ends up with, maybe 5 to 8 more wins and is a much safer pick with where he's going.
It's funny that we're sitting here and talking about Kevin Lankinen potentially being the guy to steal more starts than like Joel Hofer, right? Like you thought like Lankinen maybe a little bit over the hill, Hofer the up and coming goalie, and it just does not been the case at all. Lankinen was great last year. Both these teams close to the top 10 defensively last year, both performed very well at 5v5. I'll go Binnington as well. I've got him ranked about 30 spots ahead of Demko, to be honest with you. So at ADP here, I'm definitely lower on ADP than both of these guys, but significantly lower on Demko. Just don't really have all that much interest in a guy that has had a really difficult time staying healthy, but did trade Seeloffs in the off season, potentially an indication that Demko's healthy and they don't need the goaltending depth quite as much anymore. But yeah, a guy that's shown to be quite good, but just hasn't really put it together, and obviously injury concerns with goalies are never that fun to roster. And as you mentioned, Beebs just was almost unrosterable last year. And it was brutal because like you drafted him and just waited, and then he was basically unrosterable, and you're like, man, I waited all year for this nonsense. Absolute shit. But that's gonna do it for
injuries this too. It's not just for goalies. For him, they're injuries that affect play. So not to crap on Demko even more, but I am very afraid of Thatcher Demko.
I think like he would have the ability to be a potential steal, like a late round steal if he was going a little bit later, but that ADP
almost like an Nishushkin of goalies, like in a way.
Yeah, sure. We could say that.
Yeah.
We could call it that. That's going to do
it
for this edition of the DFO Fantasy Show. Thank you guys, as always, for tuning in. If you're listening to the podcast version and you want to see us in the flesh, I guess, you can head over to the DFO Fantasy YouTube, Fantasy Betting YouTube channel and check us out there. We've got all the videos broken down, so if you don't want to like listen to the hour-long edition of the show and break it down into smaller chunks, that's a good way to do it. So head over to the DFO Fantasy and Betting YouTube channel to check that out. And as Beebs mentioned, we'll be back later in the week with a nice quick episode, short episode, just breaking down some of the guys that are going undrafted at the very last round right now that you should either pick up at the last pick of the draft or flag or pick up if you got somebody stashed in your IR. Just some undrafted players that deserve some recognition right now because there are quite a lot of them. So me and Beebs will be rolling through them later in the week. And with that, we'll see you guys back here then.
Can't wait to bring you more content.
Peace.
Thanks for watching this video. If you want more great fantasy hockey and betting content from myself, Carter Hutton, Matthew Barnaby, and the rest of the DFO analysts, make sure you subscribe to the DFO Fantasy and Betting YouTube channel today and never miss a minute.